We acknowledge that Tri-Cities Community Television operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them along with the waters and all that is above and below.
Hello, I'm Geneviève Kyle-Lefebvre with Tri-Cities Community Television. We would like to thank the Coquitlam Library for donating the studio space today. Welcome to the Federal Election Candidate Series with Tri-Cities Community Television. Today, we are interviewing Mr. Peter Julian, the incumbent Member of Parliament and candidate of the New Democratic Party in the riding of New Westminster, Burnaby, and now Maillardville. Welcome, Mr. Peter Julian.
So good to be with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. We recorded in French, we recorded in English.
Yep.
Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Let's do it. So why people should vote for you?
Well, my family history goes back generations. My grandfather worked in Maillardville at the Fraser Mills. My father did as well. I worked in Maillardville after high school. I went back to school as an adult learner after being a laborer for a number of years and working in factories, and became a financial administrator, led national organizations, and then before I was elected to Parliament, won consecutive Business Excellence Awards. And so my passion for numbers and making sure that money actually goes where it should go, to regular people, to support families, is one of the reasons why we've had such a successful track record. I'm House Leader for the NDP. I've worked very closely with Benita Cirillo, who has been our infrastructure and disabilities critic, Jagmeet Singh, our leader, and we've gotten results. A new dental care program that's helping so many people in Maillardville and right across Canada. We have a new pharmacare program. So with people with diabetes, they will actually not have to pay. In some cases, they're paying $1,000 a month. Starting at the end of this year, thanks to the NDP's work, they will be able to have that medication covered. And they will no longer have to worry about going into the hospital because they haven't been able to get the $1,000 for their diabetes medication and they get sick, or worse. We've fought for school lunch programs that are now in place in New Westminster, Burnaby, and Coquitlam. We fought for affordable housing, and I know we'll talk about this a bit later, but the reality is that is the first significant investment we've seen in affordable housing since Paul Martin ended the affordable housing program 30 years ago. And we fought for just transition funding so that we actually can put into place the good jobs of tomorrow in clean energy. And I could go on and on. The anti-scab legislation, these are all things that the NDP brought about. And so when you ask why should folks vote for me, it's because myself and Benita and Jagmeet and our candidates throughout the region, including Laura DuPont, and Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, have been fighting for regular folks, and we've made a difference. And you need strong NDP voices in the House of Commons to make sure that we keep moving forward rather than start moving back. Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre have been talking about cuts. You need strong NDP voices to make sure that those cuts don't happen, that we actually provide more supports to people.
So what does civic leadership means to you, and how does that plays out in your role as an MP representing in the Tri-Cities Maillardville area?
That's a very good question. I believe in responsibility. That as Member of Parliament, you're not just responsible for the federal sphere, but you also work very closely with your provincial colleagues and your municipal colleagues. In New Westminster and Burnaby, I work very closely with the mayors and the city councils and school boards. Both of those cities have been endorsed by Mayor Mike Hurry of Burnaby and Mayor Patrick Johnstone of New Westminster. And in Maillardville specifically, work very closely with Jennifer Whiteside and Jennifer Blatherwick, who basically each represent part of Maillardville in the legislature. It is really important to have good relations and to work very effectively with those levels of government. And I'll give you an example. People raise municipal issues with me when I'm door knocking, which I do year round, particularly during the election campaign. And I pass on those comments to municipal councillors so that they can do the follow-up. That way people feel like they're supported. That when they raise an issue with me, it's not something that I brush off because it's not federal, but rather something that I engage in as well and pass that information on to my respective municipal colleagues. that's the way democracy should work. We should be working together in the interests of our citizens, the people who are our bosses. And whether it's Maillardville or New Westminster or Burnaby, I pledge to be doing that work so that when somebody raises an issue with me that is municipal in nature, that it is still passed on to the appropriate level of government, and we do the follow-up to make sure that things happen.
How would you collaborate with municipal and provincial leaders in the Tri-Cities to meet community needs effectively? You touched a little bit on that, but I'm going a little bit deeper now.
Yeah, it's part of the overall outreach as well, and working with our provincial colleagues. We have a very good government in British Columbia. Fortunately, it's a government that actually has the best economic performance in the country and the highest investments in things like education and healthcare, but still faces challenges because the federal government isn't carrying the load, isn't paying its fair share, and so working with provincial colleagues to make sure that things happen at the provincial level, and working with municipal people as well to make sure that things happen at the municipal level is a very important part of the job of Member of Parliament, and so. I sometimes hear from other MPs that say, that issue was raised, it's a provincial issue, a municipal issue, I didn't want to touch it. And my comment back to them is, you should be working with your provincial and municipal colleagues because that's really in the interest of everybody in the community. I know that Bernita Zarrillo does that because certainly her background as a municipal councillor is something that allows her to work very closely at all three levels. And I know that Laura Dupont, our candidate in Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, does that as well because Laura, of course, has municipal experience as well. And Jagmeet Singh, our leader, is very closely in communication with provincial and municipal colleagues. This is how we build a stronger democracy. We need to make sure that we're all working together in the interest of our bosses, who are the citizens of our riding.
Now let's talk about affordable housing. So affordable housing continues to be a major concern. We all know this, right? What steps will you take in the federal level to support housing solution in our region?
It's steps we've already taken. So last spring, the federal government wanted to pass a budget and really wasn't interested in allocating funding for affordable housing. And what the NDP did, as House Leader, I have, in consultation with the Leader, the ability of basically using a bunch of procedural tools. The Harper government didn't like that, the Liberal government doesn't like that, but it actually leads to conclusions that help people. We used those procedural tools and forced the government to invest a first $10 billion in affordable housing. That is extremely important because over 30 years, since Paul Martin ended the National Housing Program, we have not seen affordable housing being built. It's market housing. Market housing is $2,500 or $2,600 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. But that means that so many people on fixed incomes, people on minimum wage are excluded from the housing market. And the idea that Conservatives and Liberals have that we can just build market housing and that's okay has been wrong-headed and irresponsible from the start. And we're seeing the terrible outcomes of that. Growth and homelessness, people struggling, sometimes in some parts of our communities, multiple families having to share a one-bedroom apartment because they can't afford to make ends meet in any other way. So that $10 billion that we forced last spring is a first step in starting to restore affordable housing. Now, what is affordable housing? It's no more than 30% of income. You can't expect people to be paying more than 30% of income and still keep food on the table, pay for transportation, pay for clothing for their kids, and all of those other things. So this is an important first step, but we're not going to end there. We want a full restoration of the National Housing Program because that's what Canadians deserve. That's certainly what people in New Westminster, Burnaby, and Coquitlam deserve as well. Now, later on today, we'll be talking a bit about what the federal government spends money on right now, and I think the figures will astound you. But the reality is, if housing is not a priority of the federal government, we are in crisis, and we have seen successively through Conservative and Liberal governments that housing affordability crisis has blown far open. And now we need NDP MPs speaking up and pushing to make sure that we actually start to resolve and bring solutions to resolve that crisis.
So what are your thoughts on the pressure that is being put on the cities to increase densification, primarily around SkyTrains?
That's a great question, because it comes back to the federal government, right? If you have more dense housing, you need services and infrastructure to actually provide that. And what we've seen, for example, in healthcare over the past 20 years, federal government share has gone down. Federal government share of infrastructure funding has gone down. If you take municipalities, they get about 8 cents of the overall tax dollar. Provinces about a quarter. That means the lion's share of money that actually comes from taxes. It goes to the federal government. And the problem is the federal government has been misspending it. So I mentioned earlier about where the federal government is spending now. I actually asked the Parliamentary Budgetary Officer, an independent officer of Parliament, I said, how much money goes to overseas tax havens? Put in place by the Stephen Harper government, continued by the Liberal government, by the Justin Trudeau government. He came back with the astounding figures 5 years ago that we spend over $30 billion a year on overseas tax havens. That's wealthy Canadians, that's very profitable corporations taking their money offshore, not paying a cent of tax, and then being able to bring it back to Canada. And the reality is it costs us far beyond that when instead of using that $30 billion to build affordable housing, to build infrastructure, to provide healthcare services, we basically ask everybody else to sacrifice. Now, let me just bookmark that for a moment and talk about Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre's response on issues like overseas tax havens. Pierre Poilievre has benefited from that in his personal investments. Mark Carney, as head of Brookfield Asset Management, actually used Bermuda, an office above a bike shop, to move money offshore. And Mark Carney says, well, I did that because I didn't want to see double taxation of our investments. And that is completely false. The double taxation avoidance agreement that was signed with Bermuda, given that Bermuda has no tax on profits, no tax on income, means that no taxes were ever paid on those investments. And Mark Carney seems to think that's okay. So does Pierre Poilievre. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP feel differently, that we need to put an end to this massive, massive amount of money going overseas and ensure that we're bringing it back home, using it to actually invest in people's lives. Better healthcare, affordable housing, more infrastructure, all of those things have to be the priority. They won't be if you don't have strong NDP MPs in the House of Commons standing up for people each and every day. And so in answer to your question, we need more investments from the federal government. We need the federal government to stop wasting money on overseas tax havens. And we need to make sure that those investments actually serve the community and the quality of life of our citizens so that everybody has the kinds of services they need in their neighborhood, but also has the means to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head.
Transit and infrastructure are critical and growing in cities. So what project or initiative are on the way to improve mobility in the Tri-Cities Maillardville area?
Well, we need to invest more in SkyTrain. We need to invest more in the feeder bus routes as well. What we're actually seeing with TransLink is they're in a real difficult situation because they're not receiving the funding that they desperately need from the federal government. And I mentioned earlier the overseas tax havens. Here's another astounding figure for you. Between the Harper Conservatives and the Trudeau Liberals over the past 15 years, we have provided over $1 trillion in liquidity supports for Canada's big banks, often taken from the CMHC, which is supposed to be providing supports for affordable housing. Instead, used to shore up bank profits and dividends and executive bonuses. And as we've seen with overseas tax havens, just taken offshore, and people are laughing all their way to the bank. The reality is, when we talk about transit funding and sustainable transit funding, that should be the priority, not the banks and not the billionaires. And so putting in place adequate funding for TransLink so that we have a public transit system that works, including feeder buses through Maillardville that feed into the SkyTrain station in the SkyTrain network is absolutely essential. The NDP has always fought for more transit funding. People need transit funding. The fact that TransLink is suffering now and having to cut services is something that should be a source of shame to the federal government. And NDP MPs will be speaking up and insisting that funding be allocated, and insisting that all these luxury items that the federal government loves to spend money on is stopped. And so that's why re-electing Jagmeet Singh and myself and Benita Zarrillo, electing somebody like Laura DuPont can really make a difference for public transit, because we'll insist that the job get done.
What is your perspective on the impact of the past and potential U.S. tariffs, such as those imposed during the Trump administration, on local industries and workers here in the Tri-Cities?
That is a great question, because we're already seeing the impacts here. We're seeing the impacts because Donald Trump, who's never really run a business adequately, he's gone bankrupt, I think, 6 times. He was a terrible business manager. My background is winning business excellence awards and being an effective business manager. And the way you do that is by making sure you're taking care of business. You understand the impacts of every single action. Donald Trump doesn't seem to have that filter, and just he's erratic. And because nobody around him will stand up to him, we're seeing the results right here in the community, where some businesses are laying people off. Where Jagmeet Singh, I think, has been very clear during the course of this crisis with Donald Trump is in speaking up to make sure that the resources that the federal government gets through this crisis are devoted to workers and families and communities. Now, if we are leveling counter tariffs, that's money that's going to the federal government. If we are levying export taxes, that's money that's going to the federal government. It shouldn't be going to the banks. It shouldn't be going to the billionaires. Those resources should be going to ensure that workers, families, and communities are taken care of. That is the step one to give us a more robust ability to push back against Donald Trump. But we've also been talking about stopping the critical mineral supply to the United States. Now, there are a wide variety of key industries in the U.S. that depend on Canadian critical minerals. If we stop that, not only with export taxes, but actually stop the flow of those critical minerals, that will mean that many of those businesses will have to shut down temporarily. And that means the workers putting pressure on their members of Congress to actually stand up against Donald Trump. But in the longer term, what the NDP has been talking about for years, and I did this when I was trade critic, is we've had a wrong-headed approach on the economy. Both Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau wanted to put all the eggs in the American basket. And so we basically were shipping raw resources to the US, and that was the economic model. The NDP always said that that was a mistake, putting all of the eggs in the American basket, and ultimately we would pay consequences, which we're starting to pay now. So what would be the NDP approach? In addition to those robust responses to the Trump tariffs, there are 2 things that the NDP has called for and that we'll be pushing for in the next parliament. First, we live in a remarkably diverse area. You know this, Geneviève. I mean, English and French, but also 150 other languages. We have people that come from the 4 corners of the world. We have never used the diaspora, worked with the diaspora to enhance our exports to countries in the Asia-Pacific region, in Europe. In fact, I've talked to trade commissioners at various embassies around the world who don't even have the budget to buy a cup of coffee for a potential client of Canadian goods. And when you look at other countries, Australia or communities, the European community, the United States, they have far more robust budgets to actually fund exports from their country. Canada's never done that. It was irresponsible of Stephen Harper. It was irresponsible of Justin Trudeau. And I don't see Mark Carney as actually understanding the importance of making these investments for trade diversification, working with Canadians of diverse origin. We can strongly enhance our trade diversification and export to new markets. But the other thing is, what kind of products are we exporting? Mm-hmm. I said that my grandfather worked at Fraser Mills, and so did my father. And now all we do is export raw logs from Fraser Mills, which used to be a functioning value-added production softwood facility. Now it's just a raw log parking lot. And that was a major mistake made by Stephen Harper in the softwood lumber sellout, and has to be addressed. We need to be producing value added. We need to build things again. We need to value add our products, whether we're talking about our wood product sector, our oil and gas sector. We need to be doing value added and exporting value added products. Critical minerals as well, another great example, and I could go on and on. Value-added products is really the future of our Canadian economy. It can make us a powerhouse. And there's one more thing. Clean energy is now something that in the United States, they're asking more and more for feedstock from blue states, from blue-run cities. We're talking about Democratic-run cities. They're now requiring that clean energy be part of the feedstock for the power that is sent to them. And that is one area where Canada has not developed the clean energy. We believe in developing that network, that grid, that would allow us to export those products to the United States as well. So a much more diversified economy, value-added, using a trade diversification strategy. That is the NDP approach, and that's why you need NDP MPs, people speaking up like Benita Zarrillo and myself and Laura Dupont, to ensure that that actually happens and that our economy becomes much more robust, much more independent, and much more able to withstand the shocks from somebody like Donald Trump, who is erratic and irrational and a very, very poor president.
How will you engage directly with residents in the Coquitlam-Maillardville area to ensure their voice are heard in Ottawa?
I do that by being accessible. Folks can come by my office and see me. By having events throughout our area. We had 6,000 people, I think, came to our various events. We have Christmas parties, New Year parties, summer barbecues. We do town halls on things like disability issues. And so people come out and they can talk to me about any issue. I always stay till the last person has asked their question. So sometimes we'll have an event from 1 to 3. It may take me till 5 p.m. to have gone through everybody, but that's how, by getting that constant communication from my bosses, the people right now of New Westminster Burnaby, but I hope to have as my bosses the people of New Westminster Burnaby Maillardville. By speaking to them, by being accessible, that's how I'm able to take what they're telling me and work hard to actually achieve it. And when we talk about dental care and pharmacare and affordable housing and school lunches, these are all things that have come from what people have told me in the community. And we have then worked to actually make those things a reality.
So what federal resources or programs should Tri-Cities residents be more aware and taking advantage of?
Well, two things. First, Library of Parliament is a remarkable asset. I use it all the time. Our team uses it all the time. We make sure that people are aware of new programs that are coming forward. We've done that successfully to leverage all the infrastructure funding I talked about, over $3 billion over the last few years in New Westminster and Burnaby. We make sure that by using the Library of Parliament, we actually ensure that people are aware of what resources they could possibly use, including community groups. So that is a very important source of information about the complexity of the federal government that often exists. But we also use other programs as well to ensure that people in our area get the supports that they need. The research comes from Library of Parliament. Our team is very dynamic. We've helped 22,000 people in New Westminster and Burnaby over the last few years. And often it's with things like that, getting the research done through the Library of Parliament and then working to actually getting the program or the program supports in place. I know Benita Zarrillo does the same thing in Port Moody Coquitlam and does an extraordinary job. And I know that our other candidates would pick up that torch as well to make sure that people are taken care of. Not every MP will do that. A lot of Conservative and Liberal MPs just don't get into the details about the job. But with NDP MPs, it's job one is the community. And so we work very hard to make sure the community is informed and they have access to all the information they need.
Youth and civic engagement are crucial for a healthy democracy. So how will you encourage young people in the Tri-Cities to get involved?
We already have a youth council. So they meet a number of times a year. Our youth council provides me with feedback. For example, on the climate crisis, the Green New Deal legislation I brought forward came out of those meetings that I have regularly with the Youth Council. These are high school students, college students, university students, working people who are younger, working at minimum wage, sometimes working in more advanced jobs. We make sure that in all the work that we do, that they are involved, and they, as my bosses as well, grade me on how I'm doing, and that's important. It's not just the climate crisis, it's also taking action against hate and disinformation that the far right is often putting out online. That's another issue that has come up frequently when we talk with the Youth Council. And youth mental health. These are issues that haven't been addressed by our healthcare system, in large part because the federal government has cut back on funding from what the federal government used to contribute. It's gone from 35% of the overall healthcare dollar to about 25%. That's had a significant impact on BC's ability to pay for mental health funding, for example. And so we're pushing hard so that the federal government starts getting back up to the level that would actually make a difference, and that allows us to fund additional things like mental health. All of these things came out of discussions with the Youth Council, and they're a very, very valuable part of how I reach out to the community and how I receive feedback back.
I have a couple more questions. We're about 5 minutes, so we're doing very good. Okay, so looking ahead, what is your vision for the future of the Tri-Cities Maillardville area? And how will your work as an MP contribute to that?
The vision of the NDP, and I think Benita Zerillo would say the same thing, Jagmeet Singh would say the same thing, Laura DuPont would say the same thing, is a community where everybody matters, where nobody's left behind, where everybody has the wherewithal to put food on the table, to keep a roof over their head, where we're actually dealing with the climate crisis that is before us, where we're creating good jobs and small businesses feel supported that they can actually create those jobs, where we're looking at a trade diversification strategy that means that there's a lot of export industries throughout our region that are exporting developed products overseas with the support of the federal government. Our vision is really the kind of vision that I think most people support. When you ask Canadians what are the programs that they are most closely identified with, it's universal health care. Well, the NDP is pushing for universal pharmacare and pushing for dental care. They talk about having good jobs. Well, the NDP has pushed for a good jobs transition strategy that actually ensures good unionized jobs. When you look at what people want to see in the Tri-Cities and throughout the Lower Mainland, and I would suggest right across Canada, their vision lines up more closely with the NDP than with any other party. So when Mark Carney talks about cuts, when Pierre Poilievre talks about cuts, when they talk about enhancing more tax cuts for billionaires, I think they're leaving most people behind. And I think far more Canadians adhere to the NDP vision, whether we're talking about the Tri-Cities or anywhere else in Canada.
If your constituents were here in this room right now, what would you like them to know? And this is my last question.
I would like them to know that I will work as hard as I can to deliver things to them. I'm not into speechifying. I don't like ribbon cutting. I like delivering things. Jagmeet Singh shares that vision. Benita Zerillo shares that vision. Laura DuPont shares that vision. We believe in getting things done for people. The dental care program alone, that's just one thing that the NDP achieved. Nearly 2 million Canadians have already benefited from getting their, in some cases, their teeth cleaned, or problems that they'd had with their mouth for years, for the first time in decades because of the dental care program. And when you look at these other things, pharmacare, affordable housing, school lunches, all of these things, they make a profound difference in the lives of people. And that's why I think it's important for people in the Tri-Cities to vote NDP on April 28th. It's because the NDP doesn't just put forward a vision, we actually work like heck to make sure that vision becomes a reality. I know Benita Zarilla's sometimes working till midnight on Saturday night, working for people with disabilities. And she's achieved a lot with the disability benefit. The benefit needs to be much bigger. We need to lift people with disabilities out of poverty. But she accomplished that by working hard. I've been working till midnight. Jagmeet Singh's been working to midnight to deliver some of the things we've just talked about. Every single one of those things is going to make a real difference in people's lives. No longer having to pay $1,000 a month for diabetes medication. That changes a person's life. A person who has teeth pain and is unable to work because their teeth have never been replaced, they've never been able to afford dentures. The dental care program the NDP put in place changes a person's life. So vote NDP on April 28th because we're there to help make your life better, and we are going to continue to push for things that change your life.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for listening to interview with Mr. Peter Julian, the incumbent Member of Parliament and candidate for the New Democratic Party in the riding of New Westminster, Burnaby, and Maillardville. From the Tri-Cities Community Television, myself, Geneviève Kyle-Lefebvre, thank you so much for joining us today. And don't forget to go vote on April 28, 2025. All vote matters.